Everybody talks about the Reverso. The Reverso is a watch more people should experience and should wear. This year at Watches and Wonders, JLC released the Tribute Chronograph, which is a hugely compelling version of the Reverso. It's one of the sportiest Reversos in decades, and it's far more robust looking compared to its competition from the likes of Nomos, Vacheron and Cartier. This is a banger of a watch. Whenever we talk about Reverso, we inevitably retell the story of how it was originally a sports watch for polo players. Now, we often complain about how dive watches nowadays likely never come into contact with the ocean, but I suspect that the number of Reversos that see the back of a horse in a polo match, or the back of an elephant for that matter, is even more niche. No matter what though, JLC and the Reverso get a lot of written love, but it's once in a blue moon that I see somebody wearing one, which in the case of this chrono is a mistake. Let's get into it. I've been looking forward to talking about dimensions because with a case that is rectangular like this, any number I give you might as well be in binary code. Most people wouldn't have a clue. Measuring most round-faced watches, you measure from 9 to 3 o'clock. The measurement here is 29.9 millimeters. That tells you nothing. A square case like a Cartier Santos you might measure on a diagonal, as this would approximate the diameter of a circular profile. Not so with the Reverso. The Reverso has a 49.4 millimeter lug-to-lug by 29.9 millimeters. Now, is that big or small? Well, by Reverso standards, that's on the large side. Most Reverso tributes come in at around 45.6 millimeters, like the small seconds. The Duoface small seconds comes in at 47 millimeters, which is incidentally the lug-to-lug of an Omega Speedmaster, give or take. At 49.4 millimeters, the Reverso Chrono is in the large range of the most complicated Duoface models. Some few JLCs that are really complicated get a little bit bigger, but this is for the lug-to-lug on the higher end. It's not Longines Magitech territory at 51.4 millimeters. It is getting to a point where some people will feel it hangs over the wrist though. Unisex, it isn't. But then again, this is, as far as I'm concerned, a very manly watch, not only because of the size in itself, but how that size presents itself. This watch has a ton of presence, but it will feel big and small at the same time because of the narrow profile. Cartier tanks can get dainty on many men's wrists. The Tank Americaine is too slender for many individual tastes. But the Reverso, especially in these proportions, is flipping amazing. Obviously, take into account your own wrist size and all that, but there's just something very special about these precise proportions that make for a very powerful and present watch. You get the in-house JLC movement caliber 860. That's a movement with 52 hours of power reserve, a chronograph function, retrograde 30-minute counter. There's a reason JLC delivered movements to AP, Patek and the lot way back. These guys know how to make movements. This is a 5.5 millimeter thick movement in an 11.9 millimeter case, including the cradle actually, and it's a chronograph. The Speedmaster 3861 movement is nowhere near that thin. Plus, you have to appreciate that it's actually not uncomplicated putting a movement into a square case and having it look good and fit at the same time. This is what JLC do so well, and because of the skeletonized dial of the rear side chronograph, you actually get to see those inner workings, which I think is a true value add to this watch. I wouldn't level any direct criticism at this movement, but I have to say that from personal experience, Reverso movements do not have the shock resistance that you can expect from a Rolex or Omega movement. They are just not as well protected, and I wouldn't trust flipping the case over while playing polo. If this watch gets banged around a lot, it will be needing a service. It's a small price to pay, and more importantly, this is one of those watches where the movement for me is not just a bunch of mechanical components that need to tell time. This is a movement that not only looks good, but represents some serious feats of aesthetic engineering which are and should be part of the purchase proposition, even without a skeletonized dial. I don't play polo. I don't have a horse, and I haven't attempted to colonize any country on behalf of the British Empire, so I don't see it happening anytime soon. This also means I've never seen the point of having a case you could flip around to protect the glass. I also will likely never care for engraving the back with a quote or a picture, so the key feature of the Reverso is basically useless to me. Until that is when you have a Duoface. How ridiculously cool is that? The Reverso moon phase, one for day, one for night, different time zones, moon phase on the front. This is infinitely more useful than a display case back because you get two very distinct watches on the same watch. And for this chronograph, on the primary face, you get the time only on a simple, stunning sunray blue dial. Dauphine hands, no excessive text, just stunning. Some of you would say, well, that's just a dress watch. It really isn't, and there are a couple of reasons for this. The blue sunray dial is in no way as unassuming as a dress watch should be. You see this dial from a mile away. This is helped because of the rectangular shape of the case, but this is a dial that is screaming to be noticed. The distinct sloping lugs put the center case front and center. These lugs don't just play the role of following the contours of your wrist. They are shaped in a way that your eye invariably gets drawn towards the case. They scream, look at this dial. The case is so very much on display, and I think the best way I can describe it is that it is supremely confident. Finally, on this watch you have those two chrono pushers, which initially have no use because all the chrono functions are on the back. Those two rectangular pushers add to the masculine aesthetic. It breaks the rectangular symmetry of the watch and reveals the watch's functional inner workings and gives some added dimension to the front face that works really, really well. Plus, it's cool knowing that at some point people will ask what the buttons are for, and then you can flip the watch over and show the other watch face. Then there's the strap, which is this blue textile leather Casa Fagliano strap that is out of this world. It adds to the youthfulness of this watch, the sportiness, much like what I'm sure the AP people aimed for with the textile on the steel code 1159s. But wait, there's more. Put on this beige number or this gris or the brown alligator. I swear, I would have no problem with the first option in flint and tinders, blunt stones, and just outdoor all the way. Just don't get the watch too close to water with its 30 meters of water resistance, but see what I'm getting at? And I almost forgot, the straps have simple and efficient quick release systems, so you don't have to worry too much about scratching the case. And when you get bored, which is hard with that dial, but what do? You flip the case over. Skeletonized chronograph. I mean, are you kidding me? How can you not have a heart attack when seeing this thing? This is again a stunning skeleton. From the front dial, you keep the Dauphine hands and the stick hours indicators. The seconds hands and selected elements on the dial are blued steel. The minute indicator is a black dial with minute, unobtrusive but noticeable red accents. Skeleton dials are hard to do. Skeletons are often either unreadable or have a million screaming colors for contrast and legibility and strain the eyes. Not here. The main dial is front and center, but the skeletonization does not draw attention away from that main dial. This is assisted by the hour markers that function as arrows that draw your eye towards that center dial. Your eye naturally travels from there to the second dial, again being easily legible and a clear focal point. Only then does your eye start to explore the intricate skeletonized components, the visible movement, the blued screws, the gold balance wheel. This is just technically outstanding and legible at the same time. I usually have niggles with watches, but I'm having a hard time finding any with this watch. Have I given thought to whether it would be better with a chronograph without a skeletonized dial? Maybe, but for skeletons, this one is top tier. Is the first dial too plain? Well, not for me, and I think the contrast between the front and the back dial are also what makes this watch work. As Robin Williams said in Good Morning Vietnam, if you're going to fight in the jungle, you have to clash. Okay. This watch costs $21,400, but that's still cheaper than two IWC Ingenieurs. There is no competition. Yes, I think Hamilton do a model called the Face-to-Face that has something technically similar, but not in any way aesthetically or quality-wise as appealing or similar. In the ultra high end, you also find some versions, but these are niche, ultra complicated watches from Patek and the like that are just in a different category. Granted, at $21,400, this is not a cheap watch, but we're still not in high horology prices. To me though, the key selling point of the Reverso means it stands alone in terms of its alternatives. Rolex has the Daytona on an Oysterflex specifically that does something similar in terms of elegance and sportiness. The contrast of the Oysterflex in the case speaks to that same vibe of classy, sporty, masculine, and refined, much more like the Reverso Chrono. You do only get one watch face though, and it will never work as a rest watch. Nomos has the Tangente. Bell & Ross also have square watches, but none of them hit the vibe that the Reverso and this specific Reverso does. They either lean firmly into dress, formal, creative, restrained, or lean hard into rugged, hard-wearing tool watch. Realistically, the watches that I think I see most as alternatives are watches from Cartier. The Santos or the Santos Dumont. The Santos to me comes off as the more sporty, more contemporary, where the Dumont leans more refined and more classical. Neither of these watches have the duality of the Reverso, the option to do both. They're also not chronographs. Reversos, Santos, Tanks often get compared to each other, but the Reverso, especially on this larger size with this strap configuration, reveals itself as a far sportier proposition than the Santos or the Dumont. Personally, I dig the Santos a smidge more than the Dumont, but it's only a smidge. much more. Having said that, the Santos Dumont in blue presented at Watches and Wonders, although not a duoface and not a chrono, has with that skeleton dial and that biplane in the corner something special. It's impossible for normal people to get a hold of though. This watch is on the expensive side, granted, but it is one of the best reversos out there. Like I said, the single side reversos are fine, but not compelling to me. A duoface with near identical front and back in different colors is also interesting enough, but doesn't blow me away. Many of the duofaces are either a little bit samey on both sides and don't have an as adaptable personality as this model. This, however, is a badass sports watch. This watch has presence and confidence without shouting in your face. It's not a tight t-shirt to show off those tricep, biceps and pecs. It has two sides, two personalities and two use cases in one, and it will transition seamlessly from the formal event to the boardroom to the sports bar. This watch to me is for the quietly confident man. He can kill you, but you'll never see it coming. At least I think so. Like, subscribe. Cheers.